This happened to a friend of mine. She told me about it a year or so ago. We'll call her Minji. Minji is in her late 20s and works as an English tutor in South Korea. One evening, a few years ago, she was tutoring a high school boy. They were up studying pretty late, and the buses stopped running. Being a long way from his house, the boy asked if he could crash on her floor overnight and get the first bus the next morning. Minji was very reluctant, because inviting a teenage male student to stay the night didn't sound like a great idea, but he was begging her and eventually she relented. They went back to her one-room apartment, and she got into the bed, while he laid a blanket out on the floor, and they both fell asleep. A few hours later, at maybe 2 a.m., the boy wakes Minji up. "I'm really hungry," he says. "Let's go get some food." Minji opens her eyes and looks up at him in disbelief. "Food? No? It's 2 a.m. Go back to bed." But the student insists, "No, I'm so hungry. Let's eat something now." She tells him that there's some ramen in the kitchen, and he can fix himself some. This doesn't satisfy him. He doesn't want ramen. There's a 24-hour place just down the road. Let's go there. Eventually, after several minutes of persuasion, the boy gets Minji to come with him to the restaurant. They leave the apartment and head out. As soon as they're on the street, the boy turns to Minji and says, "I'm not hungry. I woke up in the middle of the night and looked under your bed. There's a man sleeping there." They call the police and discover that a homeless man had been living in Minji's apartment, sleeping under her bed, for over 2 months. The boy only saw him because he was lying on her floor, so had a clear view under the bed. The police arrested the man, and thankfully there were no other issues, but that's by far the creepiest thing that's ever happened to anyone I know. A few years ago, my brother would get a call on his cell phone around 2 to 3 a.m. every night. He would answer, and it was this hellish-sounding noise, like static mixed with screams. He changed his cell number after a month of this, and it stopped. Then after a week, it began again. The exact same noise. Exact same time. Finally, one day, he decided to backdial the call. It was an old man that had no clue what he was talking about. Still, the calls persisted. If he didn't answer, it would call a few more times. No messages were left. He decided to say screw it, ended his contract with his phone company, switched to a new one, and then got another new number. You guessed it, the screaming static calls continued after a short delay. By this time, he was terrified every night, unsure why this was happening. He backdialed the number again and got a different person. Around this time, he lost his job and his phone. The call stopped, of course. His phone was disconnected now. So one day my mom asked me to listen to this weird message she got on our home phone. It was the static screaming. We showed my brother, and he was freaking out. He backdialed the number again, and it said the number was disconnected this time. Never heard from it again after that. This happened years ago when I was working as a laundry aide and housekeeper in a nursing home when I was 19. It still unnerves me when I think about it. So, like I said, I worked in a nursing home. This one in particular had a lot of sickly patients, either extremely dependent old folk or dementia and Alzheimer-ridden people. Each room had 2 beds, so they could have roomies or a couple could be together. If the family was really rich, they could have their own. Working there was unsettling enough, between hearing loud weeping and meeting residents who were like shells. It was an extremely sickly facility, and I knew it wasn't their fault, but being young I was easily unnerved. There was one lady in particular, though, who always kinda scared me. I was 19, and this was my first job, so I was a very nervous person. She had a room to herself, with lots of things, but I never saw her have company. I tried to make small talk with her to be friendly the first few times I cleaned her room or delivered her clothes, but she always ignored me or glared at me, so I stopped trying. One day, I arrived to her room to clean, and I hear her talking, like full sentences, a full conversation, pauses and all. When I step in, she glances at me long enough for me to give a quick smile before she looks away again, staring at the ceiling. I looked around, but there was no guest. I shrug it off as a quirk and got to work. A few moments pass and I hear her talking again. I didn't understand her though, so I turned around politely and asked her, "Were you talking to me, miss?" She abruptly stopped and stared up at the ceiling, furious, and doesn't answer. I apologized softly and turned around to continue cleaning. Then she spoke again, and this time I understood her clearly. Sorry about her. There was a pause. No, I don't want you to kill her. I froze, mid-wipe, and felt chills go down my back. Surely, I misheard her. She continued on, saying, because if you do, the nurses will be upset, and everyone will make a big fuss, and I don't feel like dealing with that right now. I don't remember anything but fear. I finished as fast as I could and got the hell out of there. I found my supervisor and recounted the story hysterically, on the verge of quitting. She didn't believe me, thinking I was trying to get out early, and told me to take a break early. I took the time to calm down, and from that day on, I didn't spend more than a couple minutes in her room when I had to clean it. Every time I did, though, she would be talking to someone I couldn't see, and I didn't dare interrupt her. When I was in 8th grade, I went on a school trip that was called the Louisiana Tour. It was mostly going around to significant sites in South Louisiana. One of the places we went was Myrtle's Plantation, which is considered to be one of the most haunted places in the country. There are all kinds of stories about the place, but at one point we were standing in a room as a part of a larger group, and the tour guide was talking about something. I don't remember what. As I'm standing there, I start to hear what sounds like someone hitting a piano key. After I heard it a couple of times, I started to look around for the source of the noise. I didn't see a piano, but I kept hearing it. So I asked my friends who were standing near me if they heard it. They said no. When I heard it again, I said there is it again, and that they must have heard it. They thought I was crazy. So I went back to looking around the room. Everyone's eyes were on the tour guide except for one woman. She caught my eye and pointed at me and then at her ear with a questioning look. I realized she was asking if I heard it too, and I nodded. At this point, the tour guide starts telling a story about a soldier who had died there and that he played the piano, and multiple guests had reported hearing him playing in the night. I honestly didn't know what to think. I guess I still don't. I talked to the woman as we were all leaving the room, and she had heard the exact same thing as me, but her husband and son had not heard it. I was once featured in a St. Jude Survivor newsletter when I was about 5 years old in the early 90s. The newsletter went out across the country and apparently into Canada. There was this guy named Mitchell that called my family up out of the blue because he had read my cancer survival story. He lived somewhere in Canada and claimed to be this big-time Christian and wanted to talk to me God in prayer. My mom let him talk to me for whatever reason, and the guy actually just wanted to talk to me about Alf. This Canadian guy named Mitchell was obsessed with Alf and somehow got a hold of our mailing address and sent me tons of Alf merchandise, coloring books, pencils, Alf everything. For some reason, my parents let him talk to me whenever he would call because they bought into his God stuff and liked how he sent me Alf nonsense. This went on and off for about a year until he asked me if I had ever heard of John Wayne Gacy. He told me who he was and that he had escaped him when Gacy tried kidnapping him when he was a kid. He told me I should tell my parents they shouldn't trust strangers because you never know who you could really be talking to. I remember he didn't sound menacing when he said it, just matter of fact. Of course, my parents freaked when I told them that, and they changed numbers and called the police. They never really did anything since the guy did live in Canada by all accounts and hadn't really threatened me. Also, keep in mind Mitchell somehow had our mailing address and knew exactly where we lived. We had plans on moving soon anyway, though. Fast forward 10 years to about 2001. We live in a new house, a new state, everything unlisted. I'm now 15. What did we get in the mail? Yes, you guessed it, an Alf coloring book.